Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and This is episode 539. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter. Stacy, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. Yeah,
That is good to hear.
no complaints.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Good time to be an Eagles fan, I guess. All right. We're going to talk about the Knicks, not the Eagles. Hopefully not. Might stumble upon a subject or two during the podcast. Who knows? All right. But before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. First, being that Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may watch this podcast. If you are not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help. Strickland also has merchandise you can find on our website at www.strick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store. There's all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday. With prize, you also get access to Take These Bozos podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Ladder. And you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. So the further tiers, there's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, the pod that I host with YC, where we rant and rave about the Knicks team Memorials, get access to one of our premium articles, and you get access to Strickland NFL, which you guess it is a podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Constantine Metricos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening in on partner coordinates, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-host a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe. But none of this would be possible without you. None of this would be possible without our sponsor, FanDuel. FanDuel is where you should go to place all your bets. Whatever your betting needs are, they have you covered. NFL, NBA, NHL, draft, anything. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the Knicks. The Knicks have now won 2 games in a row after dropping 3 straight. They are 4-3 on the season. They defeated the Chicago Bulls on Sunday night and followed that up with I think 2 fairly, I wouldn't, maybe resounding is too strong, but 2 fairly strong, comfortable victories against the Bulls, who were 5-0 coming into that game, and the Wizards last night, who were definitely not 5-0 coming into that game. I think that we're seeing a lot of good changes. It is not consistent. Mike Brown has talked about this after almost every game. He even took some of the blame, saying that some of the struggles and the inconsistencies at times were down to him doing too much with the rotation, making too many substitutions, not letting guys get comfortable, not kind of letting guys feel their way out on the floor and even understanding what their roles are at times. So I think the last 2 games were a pretty strong departure from what we had seen in the first 5 games in that sense. And I also think that, separate from those kind of the playing time concerns and rotations and everything, I think what we also saw is guys and forget as a team, I think they're getting more comfortable with what the reads are, how things are supposed to operate. I think you're getting a guy like Jordan Clarkson who looks like he's slowly getting his bounce back. He looks a lot more lively right now than he did to start the season. Some of that is, to be fair, is just that he's making his threes instead of missing every single fucking one. But I also think that he's showing more off the bounce than he had in preseason and at the start of the season. So that's good to see. He's also been competing as much as you can ask Jordan Clarkson to compete on defense. So also good to see. And then obviously the biggest thing is just Josh Hart. Josh Hart playing like Josh Hart can play is a significant boost to this team. Whatever your qualms may be about his specific flaws as a player, his deficiencies as a player, if you want to be stronger about it, I don't think it's questionable that he is a quality NBA player and has been so for the Knicks for a while, which is why it was so disheartening to see the way he started this season. I did not think he was acquitting himself well as a teammate. I did not think he was playing well on top of that. And, he talked about it himself in the post game yesterday that his body language during that Chicago game on Halloween night was unacceptable and it was terrible. And I mean, honestly, I think you could point a couple of those losses at him. I thought he was atrocious in the Bucks game, and I thought he was atrocious in the Halloween game. And that's not to say that he individually, was the cause of the loss, but he was one of the primary factors, I think, in both of those losses. Um, so to see him kind of come back and play with the same verve and passion that we're accustomed to with a player like him is really good to see. And maybe most encouraging yesterday was that he was confidently taking threes. I mean, he went 2 of 4 from three. He even took one off the bounce coming when he came around the screen and his man went under. So, I think these are encouraging signs for the Knicks for sure. They're slowly seeming to get back to full health. Mitchell Robinson did not play last night. He's not going to be playing back to backs this year. But yeah, all in all, I would say that, look, obviously you never want to lose 3 straight. I understood that. I think there are a lot of reasons why that occurred. You have to give credit to your opponents, but I also think that the Knicks were, this is part of their growth process as a team. And, um, you know, is it fun going through some of that stuff? No. Like, it's not. It's not fun to go through the process. As much as people, love to gas up just the idea of like, "Oh, well, it's not just about, getting the process is very, very important, and the process is important." That doesn't make the process fun in and of itself, and I think that is something that we are experiencing watching this team early in the season, but I do think the payoff will be there because I think there are significant stylistic differences with how they're playing on a team level and on an individual level, and how they're generating shots and the quality of shots they're producing, and just the general shot distribution they have is much better than it was last year. And I think all of that, and we'll go into that in more detail, but I think all of that is encouraging. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, and also just if there are things that you also like that I didn't mention, or just if there are things that you disagree with me on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's worth noting that we have this romanticized idea that Tibbs's teams just played hard every night, came out the gate playing like they were going to play in the same way they were going to play in April, for better or worse. This is, I think, the best start the Knicks have had since 2021. Now that they're 4-3, you can say it's not exactly a murderer's row, but I think we've said this before. Early season is very noisy. I think on some of the good things, you can also say that, right? Mikal Bridges looks a lot better. That might even out, right? OG Anunoby might not shoot 40% on 8 attempts per game all year. So, we should also take some of the positives with a grain of salt. So that's why looking at the process is the most important. It's also the least sexy part, right? Because we are fans not because we want to be like, oh, well, did they make the right play? We were fans because we love getting into. We love fucking Larry Johnson's 4-point play. We love watching Brunson shake Osar Thompson out of his shoes to seal a series. And we love every game. We're investing our time. It is not for most of us, and I really respect the people who do, but even they do it on rewatch. It is not to hyper analyze the process. So we're going to be living and dying with some of these highs and lows. The fact that Tibbs is fired is going to add more fuel to that fire in terms of the chatter. But I would generally agree. Are they experimenting more? Yes, right. Brown himself, I like. I don't know what it's going to be like when he's here for a year or two in season. Right now, he's saying a lot of the right things. The Mitch thing has been handled weird, but aside from that, he admitted like I was a little all over the place with my lineups. Even if you and I agree, which I think we do, that was probably worthwhile, right, to kind of explore the space. For him to say that also gives him some credibility with his players, because as much as they might be like, yeah, I get it, it's a process. It's like, bro, don't fucking do that. Like, play the lineups I think we should. He's saying that, look, it's showing some humility and willingness to learn. And I you posted a tweet about some of the changes in terms of process. I'll let you talk
We'll
about that when you want. But I think from the standpoint of we've talked about this a million times, right? But is this roster good enough to win a championship? The fact of the matter is, after last year, we didn't know. We hadn't explored much of the space of it. we had found this. We had found something that had the results it did. Um, Maybe that was all they could do. Maybe they really are just talent wise a team that has to scrape by the Pistons. Yeah, that beats the Celtics, but it has some good fortune. I'm not talking about Tatum's injury. I'm not calling that good fortune. I'm talking about the first two games when they came back from 20 points down. Um, and then is ultimately with an evenly matched team that has a more innovative coach going to lose. Is that just all they are? We weren't going to know that. We're trying to find out. And we're trying the things that you should explore, right? You should say, can it work in a different way? And some people might say it's not even worth trying. You're going to come to the same conclusions. If we come to the same conclusions, then you can make a roster change. But I think there's something to be said about trying to identify those conclusions. And some of the early returns have been pretty promising. So,
Yeah. You don't know what works until you try it. And you might have an inclination that, hey, this isn't a good lineup. Like, that is often the case. And it often proves to be true. Like, hey, I think this lineup with these three guys is probably terrible. Um, Let me put it out there. You play it for 10 minutes or something over the course of a couple of games, and you might realize, like, yeah, I was right. That lineup does suck. I don't need to try that really anymore. Um, but sometimes you might find something that you do like. I'll give an example. And look, it was the Wizards yesterday. I understand they're not a great basketball team. Um, but we saw a lineup yesterday that was Yabusele, it was Hart, it was Bridges, it was Clarkson, and it was Brunson. And that lineup actually looked really good. And if you had told me that, a week ago, I'd have been like, I just don't see how that lineup has the necessary kind of like overall skill set to work. And you know what? It might not work, and it probably won't work in a lot of situations. But you do know now that, hey, there might be some situations like when the opposing team center is Marvin Bagley and they don't have a real rim protector out there. And, again, you're playing the Wizards. So, take all of it with a grain of salt to an extent. But what you need to play, like now you know that, okay, this lineup actually did work in this game. Maybe now you are comfortable trying it in a setting against, let's say, look, we're playing Minnesota on Wednesday. That's a much stronger opponent than Washington. Maybe you're comfortable trying that for a couple minutes, seeing if, let's see how this handles a step up now in competition. And that's how you learn stuff about your team. That's how you learn what these different combinations of players can possibly look like. And it's the kind of thing that unfortunately we didn't get enough of with Tom Thibodeau. And that's, look, obviously the things that Tibbs did well were good. Like, I think there's a lot of, we don't need to go into that because we've done it 6 billion times. So it's not to act like Tom did nothing well for the Knicks. But, we're at a point where it's all about finding those margins. And you can't find margins if you're not looking for them. And I think the fact that Brown is willing to look and that he is searching and he's exploring the depths of the roster, within reason now. I think these last two games were a departure from what we saw in the first five, which were really, really like, I mean, the first game, it was crazy how many substitutions I thought were being made. I think he played 11 guys in the first quarter. Like it was insane. And I'm fine with that type of insanity early in the season because that's how you figure it out. Like, you know, again, if you don't give something a chance, you can't know for certain that it doesn't work. Um, and you know, every coach has their own intuition and their gut that they're going to go on. But the more data you have, maybe that might be good for your own intuition, right? Because you might have an intuition on what lineup could work against a specific opponent in a specific situation. If you've never played the lineup that you have an intuition about, you won't know that. So it's good to get this stuff out of the way early in the season. See what works, see what doesn't. And I don't think he's done experimenting. I fully expect there to be some OG at the five experimentation done. I fully expect, whatever, we can go on and on and on about the permutations. Um, but I think this roster it's not the most versatile roster in the league. I don't think that. But I do think it has more versatility and had more versatility last year than Thibodeau was willing to lean into. And I think at the very least, Mike Brown is showing that, you know, we might not love every minute of it, but I am willing to push some buttons here. I am willing to try things, throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And I think that's good. And like, just a small example is honestly, if Thibodeau had come out, if Thibodeau was still the coach, and yesterday, right 30 minutes before the game or whatever it happens, you get the announcement of who the starters are. If we all saw Shamit was starting, I would have been like, what the fuck are we doing? This is awful. Like, just start Deuce, give him a chance or whatever. Um, but because it's Mike Brown, and because we now at least have some decent track record here of 6 games going into last night, that even if he goes out with a certain starting lineup, that does not mean that Landry Shamet is going to get X amount of minutes and that Deuce or Hart or whoever won't come in until the 3-minute mark of the first quarter. And we
And
don't
he's
know the
played
rigidity of
these
it.
with the starters a lot. Even with the Hart thing, I don't think we would have been as mad if he literally never played Deuce with the starters. He never played Shemet with the starters. So we never went 5 out. If your whole thing is that you have Cat who can play center, you never go 5 out. Like, that's also why I wasn't that mad about Shemet, because he gives you that look. Would I prefer Deuce? Yes. But he's trying different things, and he's already done that. And we've seen the results. He's seen it. So, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I think, yeah, it's not just a bias against Tibbs. It's like, or a bias about the starters. It's also like the starters are going to play together mostly all the time. If you're not starting with them, you're probably not going to play with them much.
Yeah, and I mean, just here's an example. The Knicks' 3 most used 5-man lineup so far are, uh, they're the 4 main starters, right? So OG, Bridges, Brunson, Towns. And number 1, clocking in at 30 minutes and 36 seconds, is the one with Landry Shamet. And number 2 is the old starting lineup with Josh Hart. And number 3 is the lineup with Deuce McBride. It's important to note here that Deuce McBride missed 2 games with a personal issue, which, hopefully everything is okay and great to have him back.
And may have also contributed to him not starting, right? Maybe they want to ease him
Yeah,
back.
we'll
He
again,
struggled his
we'll
first
see
game
what
back. So.
yeah, we'll see what happens. But again, like the lineup, the results here are mixed. And again, we're not dealing with big samples, so take all of this with a grain of salt. But the Knicks are minus 9.2 in the lineup with Shamit. They're plus 19.3 in the old lineup with Josh Hart, and they're plus 11.1 in the lineup with Deuce McBride. Like, so, does this definitively tell us that the lineup with Shamit sucks and that the lineup with Josh Hart now is completely fixed and that the lineup with Deuce McBride remains extremely strong? No, it doesn't tell us that definitively at all. But that's the point, is to try these things and increase the sample and increase your knowledge of what these things are capable of so you can make more informed decisions online. Like, for example, that Landry Shamit lineup, is it possible that they're terrible? Yeah, it's definitely possible they're terrible. It's also possible that maybe they're getting unlucky with, you know, shot luck, right? They're missing shots that they really should be hitting at a higher clip, and opponents are making shots that they really should be missing at a higher clip. And vice versa for the good lineups that Hart and Deuce are putting in. That's why you have to play more. And also, I'll say this. Um, let's say that he continues to use the old starting lineup with Josh Hart a bunch, be it as a starter or be it mixing it in off the bench. If that lineup is now playing better than it did to close last season, and it proves itself to actually be a strong lineup, maybe be the lineup that we thought it should be and could be when this team was assembled prior to training camp last year after the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. Like, okay, then good, then great. Like, I'm happy for that, and that just means that there needed to be a tactical tweak that wasn't made for whatever reason last year, and Mike Brown has done that, and then he's willing to try, and that he's willing to give that lineup another chance. Because look, as critical as we all were of that lineup at the end of last season because of how poorly it had performed basically since the turn of, once the calendar turned to 2025, I think to a man, almost, or woman or whatever, you would have said that lineup, well, look, maybe I have reservations about how good it should be. but it should certainly be. It should not be a net negative. Like it should not be bad. It should not just be flat out bad. And you know, I think that was as concerning as just a lack of variation, right? And the endless trust in a lineup that ceased to be functioning by the end of last season. There are a lot of reasons for it, and we don't need to revisit them or relive them because we've litigated it, hundreds of times on here, and every Knicks fan has already heard the debates if they're listening to this podcast or any Knicks podcast, probably. Um, but like one of the main components of why it was not functioning and why I think it's possible it could be good with another coach, even if I still have reservations about is it actually the Knicks' best lineup? I have a hard time getting there. Again, this is why you play lineups a bunch of minutes and determine what happens. Um, but the things that we're missing, right, were okay, if you're going to play Josh Hart and they're going to have, teams are going to put an opposing center on him or whatever, okay, then there needs to be a lot more ball and player movement. That's not just random the way it was last year. Because I do think there was ball and player movement early in the season, but it was all very off the cuff, all very random. I think the difference that we're seeing now between that and what we're seeing under Mike Brown is that this is orchestrated. This is supposed to work like a symphony. They are not supposed to be randomly cutting and end up in the same spot. They are not like it's not supposed to be just Jalen Brunson dribble the ball, dribble the ball, dribble the ball, wait for something to happen, somebody set a screen and make it go. These are not actions that are kind of taking that are segmented. That's the best way I could describe the Knicks offense last year. It's like, sure, did they run stuff from Mikal Bridges? Yes. Was it layered in any way? Like again, if you I'm sure plenty of people that listen to the podcast will watch football. They always talk about this, right? Run game and pass game, they're married, and it's like when you layer those two, that's how a great offense is supposed to work. Is those things are supposed to complement each other, and a good run game can benefit your pass game and open up stuff in the pass game, and a great pass game can obviously open up stuff in the run game. This is how it's supposed to work. Did we run stuff for Breakout Bridges last year? Sure. Did it create any benefit for anybody else? Like, was it involved? Did it intertwine with other actions that you're taking on the floor? Like, were there ever any actions that you can remember where it was like, oh, we ran this really cool action for Brunson, which opened up this thing for Mikal on the other side of the floor, which opens up this look in the corner for somebody from three? Like, I don't remember any of that, and I watched every single game, like you watched every single game, and that is kind of the point. Is the parts, the sum did not equal the parts, right? And that I think is what Mike Brown was brought in to do. And it's why, I will bring up the stats here in a little bit more granularly, but it's why, like, if you watch the Knicks this year so far through 7 games, and it's early, so things can change. Like, you would watch the Knicks if you had watched all 7 games and been like, man, Mikal Bridges is like really involved and he's like doing a lot more this year. And that's great. It is because it is great because that's a change that needed to happen. It might shock you to find out that Mikal Bridges' usage is actually significantly down. Significantly down. But anybody that's watching these games would tell you he's way more involved. And that's the point, is it's not just about getting this guy shots, right? Like, I think any coach can actually do that. Oh, I want to get this guy shots. Okay, you can do that. It's not that hard to do. But how does that help your collective group? How does that drive the cumulative sum of what your team is in the aggregate? Because we can't recreate. But like no, like in all seriousness, like how does it do more? How does it elevate the group? And again, it's too early to say that what Mike Brown is doing is going to elevate the group and this is everything that we needed. But if you were looking for early signs of what is it that the Knicks, again, there's a huge hullabaloo when the Knicks fired Tom Thibodeau. And it's like, how could you do this? They went to the Eastern Conference Finals, the most successful coach since Jeff Van Gundy, blah, 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 blah. And he deserves all those accolades, and he earned all those accolades. So credit to him. But Why would the Knicks do this? You're seeing it. If you're watching these games, you are seeing why they made this move and what they're striving for. They're not striving for more of the same. They are not striving for more of the same. They're striving for something that is philosophically different from what they had been doing under Tom Thibodeau for years. And again, like this is not a knock on Tom Thibodeau because I think he's a damn good coach. And honestly, I think there are teams in this league right now that could use Tom Thibodeau as their head coach. But this team, this version of this team with these players, these personalities, what is required to get the most out of this group? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I'll just tell you like a small thing. And I tweeted this out last night. And I wasn't trying to call anybody out, which somebody suggested I mentions. Last night, I tweeted this out. Last year, we were told, right? Basically, ever since Julius Randle went out in the 2023-24 season, we have been told constantly, well, the Knicks can't take that many threes because they don't have anybody other than Jalen Brunson that produces threes, that can shift the defense, that can create open shots for their teammates. And I reject that. I have consistently rejected that. My opinion has been there might be a limit to how many you can create. But to tell me that a team with the talent the Knicks had last year that finished 28th in the fucking league in three-point attempt rate is the standard and we can't expect more is nonsense. It's nonsense. It was nonsense then, and it's nonsense now as we're seeing with largely the same cast of characters. The Knicks are now 5th in the league in three-point attempt rate. They went from taking 38.2% of their shots from three last year to 47.8% this year. That's nearly a 10% difference, 9.6%. So they're taking 9.6% more of their total field goals from three. And that has come while they're only, so again, 7 games. Let's not get too crazy, but these are early trends that are worth noting. Last year, they finished 2nd in the league in percentage of field goal shots at the rim. Field goal attempts to the rim. That was 27%. Really good number. You want to take a lot of shots to the rim, right? Those are literally the most efficient shots in the game. The Knicks this year are 10th. Oh, they've dropped. They've only dropped. They're taking 25.7% of their shots at the rim this year. 25.7%. So they've dropped 1.3% in terms of shots at the rim, and they've increased their three-point attempt rate by 9.6%. Daryl Morey is jerking off to that. That's what I'm telling you. Daryl Morey is having a great time with that trade-off. And the point is, the Knicks are now taking over 40. They're taking over 43s per game with, again, the same personnel by and large. So this notion that was pushed last year and this idea that, well, the roster just doesn't allow for it. By the way, they're shooting the same percentage so far that they did last year, 36.5%. 7 games. We'll see where it lands. I have a feeling that Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson will shoot better than they have from 3, and Mikal Bridges will shoot worse from 3, and OG Anunoby will come down a little bit from 3. It'll all be great, but there will be some ups and downs. But I think this team is fully capable of holding a similar percentage at a much higher volume than they took last year. And again, small thing you want to like if you're looking for reasons why did the Knicks move on from Tom Thibodeau, this is the type of granular stuff you need to look at and not just look at, oh, they lost 3 in a row and oh my god, like what if they lost their identity or whatever. Like, no, like their identity was lost last year, to be honest with you. They looked like a lost team half the time. And credit to the players, and credit Tom Thibodeau too for I guess guiding them there. But credit to the players for making something of a season that felt quite literally like a waste of time in many ways. Credit to them. But what we're watching now, this is the evolution you want to see. This is the evolution of a basketball team that the Knicks front office 100% was striving for. This is what they were striving for. This is the process they want to go through to take this team to a level that I believe personally, and I'm assuming they believe, can get them to a championship.
Yeah, I mean, we have no idea if it's going to work, right? That's kind of the point. We knew that the other way, nobody has won that way, really, in recent memory, right? Just ball dominant. The closest thing you can say is maybe Giannis in the Bucks. You can also say Cleveland with LeBron doing that, got to 6 games. I think the following year he was more off ball. But LeBron is the closest thing to that heliocentric star. I think Brunson's a 1A. He's not LeBron. He's not Cleveland LeBron. So, it's a very difficult thing to do. And you have to figure out other ways. And then you can say, well, if they had optimized the roster better, they could have done it. It is extremely difficult to. We've talked about this, right? Assembling the perfect roster. The way to do it is what Oklahoma City did, right? They tanked for years. They accumulated a lot of assets. Great. The Knicks were not going to do that.
And even to that point, just sorry to interrupt, but even to that point, how many teams have we seen do what Oklahoma City has done? Maybe not to the same extremes, but the concept of accumulating draft capital, tanking for a few years,
Look at New
whatever,
Orleans.
and never come close. Like it's not some foolproof solution. I mean, look, again, like you said, the process in Philly, that's an obvious example. If you want to go across sports, look at the Jets right now. I'm not saying this to take the piss out of the fans or anything like that. But what they did today is, I think it's exactly what they need to do, right? Trade Quinn Williams, get a pick. Trade Sauce Gardner, get 2 picks. Load up on draft capital, clean up your cap sheet, and build to a vision that's maybe 2 years down the line. That's exactly what the Jets did when Joe Douglas took over. And guess what? What did he achieve? Absolutely fuck all. So, like, just because you do the right things and do the thing that gives you the highest like it's all about theoretical ceiling in a lot of this stuff, right? Where it's like, well, theoretically, if you get all these picks and then you hit on these picks, then it's going to be great. Yeah, but like that's theoretical. That's not how the real world works. Missteps are going to be made, mistakes are going to be made, and who knows what happens, right? Like things can change like that. Like an injury, unfortunately, can change everything. So,
I
yeah,
think New
like
Orleans is the
your point,
best example.
OKC is yeah. If OKC is an example of like what's the right thing to do, I think that's fair. But I also think it's fair to say then that um, it's a little bit more complicated than just doing the right things from a process standpoint. Results ultimately need to be delivered.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that process isn't foolproof, and it requires a lot of patience that not every market can handle. And there's always exceptions, right? Um, you know, are you able to? Oklahoma City was able to get their franchise player because they got Paul George, right? So this wasn't just tanking, right? It was a bunch of different things. Really, the only tank pick that worked out well was Chet, right? Most of the other picks were late first. But the Knicks had tried that before. The Knicks had tried tanking. The Knicks had tried, saving up cap space. So they worked on getting incrementally better. I don't think there's a foolproof strategy, right? I think you and I have talked about this. I don't think the Spurs deserve some insane amount of credit for team building, right? Harper was second overall pick. Castle was a high lottery pick. I think they still, considering what they still have not addressed the spacing issues. They're good because they happen to get the number 1 pick. We had the worst record once, right? And we got RJ. They did not have the worst record, and they got Wemby, right? You can't tell me that San Antonio's process was great. But you can relitigate. We don't want to relitigate all that. This is where the Knicks have ended up, and frankly, it is a league where it's very, very tough to build some kind of dominant roster. Even Oklahoma City got pushed to 7 games. Might have lost to Indiana if Halliburton didn't get hurt. Speaking of Halliburton, R.I.P. Dick Cheney. These are the there's a lot of variance. There's a lot of different ways this could go. So given what you're at now, you can't just keep blaming the roster and saying you don't have enough depth. Cat sucks. Brunson and Cat can't win together. This is where there are other ways to go. You could have kept Randall. Then you don't have a center. Or if you played Randall at center, your defense could be even worse. And you can't really go 5 out because he's not the shooter that Cat is. And if you played the same lineup with Randall that you played with Cat last year, the starters, I'm willing to bet $1 it would have been worse. So you look at all those things and you say, all right, this might not be a championship roster. We know we can get to the Eastern Conference Finals. We know we have a guy who can elevate in the playoffs. We have another guy who is a bit of a playoff dropper, but still a very talented number two. We have defensive wings. How do we make this happen? What has not been working and what could? And you have to try that. And if that doesn't work, then at some point you get to where maybe not the Jets are, but maybe a team like Portland eventually got to, where we might have to blow it up at some point, right? If it's just not working. But A, to not have that data, and B, to just constantly say that until there's that's the thing. Until you give me a perfect roster, I can't win. That's not the flex you think it is, So, I mean, Carlisle was playing Jarris Walker in the playoffs against us. His 12th man, right? So it's not it doesn't bode very well for you.
Well, look, I mean, that you brought it up, so I'll just say it flat out. Your roster is your roster to a certain extent. Like, yeah, you can keep turning it over, and the Knicks did turn it over a bunch. Like, this is what is ridiculous to me. Is like the Knicks did do things to get players that Tom Thibodeau wanted, and they moved out players. Like, we can just say it. Like, would I like to have Quentin Grimes, this version of Quentin Grimes, on this team right now? Yeah. Do I think that an offense where a player like him felt like he was more involved may have benefited him and made him more okay with moving from the starters to the bench and all that type of stuff? Maybe. I don't know. But like the Knicks traded a guy like him to accommodate Tom Thibodeau in a lot of ways. And bring in guys like Boyan and Burks, who they knew would play and would help them in that immediate playoff run, which I think they correctly rolled the dice and thought that team had a chance to win a championship that year. Unfortunately, injuries completely derailed them, and that killed any chance of it that they had. You can't control for that, but like when you kind of see that stuff as a front office of like, oh, this guy Grimes looks actually maybe he's as good as we thought he was once upon a time, just in a different system. And you see a guy like Obi who is flawed and I think people go way overboard when they're like, I can't believe the Knicks gave this guy away. Like, it's like, all right, relax. But he's a legit contributor. He was a legit contributor to a finals team last year. He played real minutes in the finals. He had moments like he had what was that, game one where he hit like 5 threes or the hell it was. Like when you see that stuff, it makes you think as a front office. Maybe not that your coach is dog shit because he's not, and he's a good coach, but maybe like, all right, well, okay, Grimes left and he was unhappy about XYZ. And now McCall's here. We traded for McCall. We traded all this shit for McCall. And he seems to be being used in the same exact way. Like, well, that makes no sense. Like, we think Mikal Bridges has proven that he can do more. This isn't a young player trying to establish himself. This is an established player who has shown that he can do more than what we are currently asking him to do, and is also unhappy in that role and feels uninvolved and feels misused, maybe, or not utilized enough is perhaps the better term. And I think when you see that as a front office, it makes you think like, okay, we need to strive for more. And look, I think it's been reported, right, that if they had won the Eastern Conference Finals, that might have been the only way for Tibbs to kind of save his job. But I think that Eastern Conference Finals was revealing enough because, yeah, you made this crazy upset against the Celtics, and it was an upset. The Knicks were down 20 points in each of the first 3 games. They won 2 of them on the road, right? Crazy. They were down 15 in game 4. They come back and win that. They were down 20. They get blown out in game 5, and then they blow out the Celtics finally in game 6. But, like, that's not a series that you look at. I think if you're running simulations, which I'm assuming front offices probably do constantly, if you kind of just like simulated that series out with the same kind of lineups and whatever, and shots and all these type of things that you could do, I guarantee you most simulations would be like, yeah, like 88% of the time, 94% of the time, whatever it is, the Celtics win that series. And not only do they win that series, they have a decent chance of sweeping, right? Like I think that is what a simulation would tell you. And
if we played it the same way.
Yeah, but that's my point. Is if you're like grading this coach, you're like, okay, well, he's probably going to play the same way. And when you look at that, you're like, okay, this process seems flawed because maybe the Celtics they are, but I think the Celtics last year were a better, more talented team than the Knicks were. Okay, But like the gap should not have been where it was. I mean, you saw that in the regular season games, really, right? Like those first three games were miserable, and yeah, you lose, you drop the fourth game to them at home, which you probably should have won. But like when you kind of judge it in that sense, okay, fine. But maybe you accept it. You're like, okay, well, but you know what? He did do it. That team stayed together. They fought against all the odds, and they came back three times, three double-digit victories in that series. And kudos to them, and kudos to the head coach. Let's see what he does in the conference finals now. You cannot have watched that conference finals. I dare anybody to have watched that conference finals and dare to tell me that Tom Thibodeau is in the same stratosphere, same tier anyway, of coaches, Rick Carlisle. And guess what? How many people do you think would say that Tyrese Halliburton is a consensus top 5 MVP caliber player? I don't think anybody thinks that.
A few
Like
might, but yeah.
if you gave every team in the league, right? If you just did like a snake draft of every team in the league, what are the top 5 picks
Wemby.
in no particular order? Just
Wait,
what
to
are
win
they?
a series or to? I'm
No, I'm just
either
saying
way. It's
you're
Wemby.
starting a franchise tomorrow.
Wemby, Jokic, Luka, Giannis.
Guy just won a championship,
Oh, yeah, SGA. So
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
I
it's
don't think
like
Halliburton is quite close to those guys.
yeah, and that's not a knock on Halliburton. Like we love Brunson. I would take all of those guys over Jalen Brunson, right? Like it's not a knock on
And I'd
either
take a
like
healthy
on Hall.
Tatum too, and probably a couple other guys. So yeah,
Yeah. So like I just feel I just think that like when you so okay, now we are judging a coach against another coach who we both feel, yes, these players are great, but they are not the lock Hall of Famer level of player, right? Like, do I think they're both on a path to become Hall of Famers? Sure. But they're not lock Hall of Famers. Those 5 guys you named are lock Hall of Famers, right? They are lock Hall of Famers. It's gonna
Wemby
happen.
already.
I mean, unless there's an injury, like, is there any path where he stays healthy for 10 years where you're like, this guy is not a Hall of Famer, right? Like, it's just not possible.
Yeah, so I would say that's
Um,
also with Brunson. I think if he's healthy for 5 years, I also see
of
that, but it's
course.
not as much of a guarantee. Right?
I mean, but these are guys that's like you kind of knew it very soon with them. I guess SGA is the outlier of that group. I just have a tough time believing Halliburton or Brunson are at the level of SGA. Anyway, the point being is, okay, Brunson and Halliburton, similar tier of best player on a championship team. Let's go with that, right? Okay, the Knicks were favored. They had home court advantage. This time around, the Knicks were healthy. They had everybody. That was a factor in this series. You had everybody. You had Mitchell Robinson. You had Dish McBride. You had Josh Hart. You had obviously all the other starters. Like you had all of your depth pieces that you wanted, and you were healthy. Watch those games. Like, yes, was it some freak insane thing that the Pacers came back in game one? Absolutely, no question, no question. It's an absolute freak outlier of a performance. Seems like it was a freak outlier for the Knicks come back from 20 in game three, too. So let's say those cancel out. Now watch the rest of the series. Carlisle is pushing buttons in a way that Tom Thibodeau cannot. He used his depth in ways that Tom Thibodeau would not. And he was rewarded for using that depth for the second year in a row, where it looked like at the end of the series, the Knicks had nothing left. They had nothing left. You watch Brunson in that game six. He looks like a guy who has nothing left. Josh Hart said he had nothing left. He had nothing. He was shot mentally and physically, as far as I'm concerned. But that is the difference. And obviously, Carlisle then goes to the finals. And, it's obviously not just Rick Carlisle on his own, but like he is pushing the right buttons. And obviously, they lose the series. Who knows what happens if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't rupture his Achilles? It's what happened. But to push that Oklahoma City team 7 games with a team in the Pacers that I mean, is
Well, all
anybody
the things you
trading
said
the
apply,
OKC
right?
roster?
You like the
Yeah,
OKC has a different level of top player than Halliburton. Not a knock on him. SGA won MVP. Halliburton is like second team All NBA level. That's a pretty big difference. Um, Indiana had a great big in Miles Turner. OKC had Chet and Benedict Arnold. So um, you know, and then they had a better second option, right? They had Jalen Williams. They had defenders all over the place. So that shouldn't have been a 7-game series. I think most of us thought it would be over in 5 tops. So yeah, sorry to interrupt, but all the things you just said about why the Knicks evenly matched with the Pacers were like, even when the Pacers were outmatched, pretty objectively.
Right. Yeah, and so I just think like to come back to it, it's like, okay, so is it reasonable to be like, well, the Knicks don't have that level of player, right? As an SGA, Giannis, whatever. Sure, that's more than reasonable to say that. So what's the plan then? We're supposed to like just throw the towel in and blow it up and wait till you draft another player, like a player of that caliber. Like the Knicks have existed for however many fucking years, 90 years, who knows? Um, how many times have they had a player of that caliber? I think the only guy is like Willis Reed, who was an MVP.
Ewing, I
That's
think
it.
it was in that territory. It's just weird because there were so many good bigs in that era. But I agree with
Well, that's
you.
what I'm saying. But he's not. But he was never the best big. He was not the best big in the league. And so, like, or like, he was never clearly the best big in the league. And he was never the best player in his conference, unfortunately for us. But like, you know, it's not. This is. I don't want to disparage Patrick Ewing. My point is like, it's not easy to just go ahead and get that level of player. That it doesn't happen like that. Like you don't just get that player. There's these are like
Unless you're the fucking
guys that have
Spurs, but
right. Yeah, well, yeah, they just get it on at will. But like these are basically guys that you think have the potential to be pantheon level players, right? Because that's like what I think of all those 5 guys is they have the potential to be pantheon players. And I don't know that they'll all get there. It's very possible that they don't get there. It's very hard to be a pantheon level player, but like they have the potential to be. I don't think Halburn's there. I don't think Brunson's there. Doesn't mean that they're not Hall of Famers or they're not great, but they're not there. But that's what you have. That's what you get as a team. So if you don't like that, then you have 2 options, right? There are 2 options that you have. The option one that the Knicks have chosen, and I think is the no-brainer option, is let's try and put the best fucking team we can around this guy and maximize everything we can and see what happens. Let's see where the chips fall. The other option you have is okay, let's trade this guy because he's not good enough and we don't think we'll ever be good enough, and let's just get a bunch of picks and move on. Those are your 2 options. That's it. There's no other options. You don't have other options. So if like the Knicks have played their big hands, right? They traded a lot to get Mikal Bridges, who Tom Thibodeau was a fan of. They traded to get OG Anunoby, Tom Thibodeau loves. They traded to get Karl Anthony Towns, who apparently Tom Thibodeau okayed that trade. Okayed the trade. Um, like you're talking about an All NBA big, you have an All NBA All Star guard who's an MVP caliber player or MVP caliber candidate. You have 3 and D solid 2-way wings. You have a role player in Josh Hart who Tibbs adores and obviously has proven his worth. You know, does he have flaws? Sure, but I think there's no question that Josh Hart is a quality player. Mitchell Robinson, who is one of the best ring protecting, rebounding bigs of this generation, and has won playoff series for the Knicks, tilted playoff series in massive ways for the Knicks. Like you have Deuce McBride, who's like a very solid combo guard off the bench. You have these things. So at what point do I look at it and be like, look, man, is there stuff I can get you? Yeah. But I can't just get it for you. Like I cannot just go out and get you the things you need. I also need you to get more out of what we have. And last year we did not get enough out of the group we gave you. I think it's fair to look at that and say that's the case. And then I think it's fair to then look at the process. Why does it feel like we didn't get enough out of these guys, right? What exactly are we talking about when we say that? And there are a few things, right? There's a few things that go into this. And I think some of that has to do with just like real basic level of stuff, right? So if you look at the Knicks shot chart, right? Last year, we already did this, right? They took 38.2% of their shots from 3, and this year they're taking 47.8. Last year they took 27% of shots of their total shots at the rim. This year it's 25.7. That's good. That's exactly what you want to see. This year the Knicks are generating in terms of wide open threes per game. The Knicks are at 19.4 per game so far this year through 7 games. And look, tracking data is wonky, as Mike Brown himself mentioned in post-game presser yesterday. 19.4. The year before that, they were 13.6 under Tom Thibodeau. 13.6, basically the same roster. This year, the Knicks are getting 17.9 open threes, which is closest defenders 4 to 6 feet away. 17.9. That's the 4th best mark in the league. Last year, they shot. It's loading. I promise you, it's going to load very soon here. Last year, they generated. Oh, where are we, New York Knicks? Where are we, New York Knicks? The Knicks took. What the hell? This doesn't make any sense. We'll get back to it. I'm not sure why this is being weird right now. It was much less than that, I promise you that. But I just think like when you kind of look at this granular stuff and you see it more. Okay, here we go. The Knicks last year shot 15.3. This is open threes, so 4 to 6 feet away. So 15.3 last year, and you go to this year, and it is again 4th best mark in the league, 17.9. These are small differences. It's only 2.5 more threes per game, but those are the margins you're talking about. These are the margins that you need to capture.
I'll pull
Sorry,
pace.
say it again.
I was going to say some of that might be
the pace last year. At least the pace last year for basketball reference, they were 96.7 in pace. This year they're 99.1. Again,
so that's part of it, right?
The Knicks want to play faster, but they don't need to play. They're not built to play like helter-skelter, top end of the league pace. They're not built to be that. But they can play faster, and that was the point. It's not even just about playing faster. Pace is I think pace is such a limited way of looking at it. We've talked about this many times before. It's not just about the pace. It's about getting into your offense faster. And again, look at the Knicks. Just watch them play this year. You can't tell me they're not getting into their offense faster. They might not do it successfully every time. They've definitely had issues getting into their offense, but they're getting the ball into the front court much faster this year. And
Brunson should never have an 8-second violation. We had multiple in the playoffs. That was fucking insane, right? One of the best ball
handlers. And it was the second year in a row that was the case, where it was like, oh my God, we can't deal with this Indiana press. And it's like, look, man, Indiana they might be the kings of pressuring in the backcourt, but like you got to have something other than just like Jalen Brunson, here's the ball, and please, deal with Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard trying to dry hump you up the floor every possession for 48 minutes a game. So I just think when you look at that stuff, it's a massive difference. It's a massive difference, and it's just like this is ultimately what you're chasing are those little margins, and how you derive that stuff is key.
Let me kind of on that point though, right? I think we're all agree that this was a change that we needed to see how it would work. So far, the results have been mixed. I think that's fair to say. They have at times looked like a juggernaut. They have at times looked like a team that can be beaten by anybody. And that's not to take away from Chicago, but even the first Chicago game, right? It's one thing to say they're playing at a high level. Literally everyone was getting free forays to the basket. The Knicks played a pretty good offensive game, but clearly not good enough. But it is the results are going to matter. So there was a comment that a lot of people weighed in on from XJ, Xavier, Justin, from I believe I consider him a friend of the pod. I don't think he's been on. But yeah, he's been on. I haven't been on with him. Obviously, he works with Jeff, very close. He was on a lot of work for us at the Strickland. So he said that, this isn't a referendum on whether whatever happens this year, it's not a referendum on whether firing Tibbs was the right decision. Among others, Ian Begley said, well, if the Knicks lose in the first round, doesn't that mean firing Tibbs was the wrong decision, right? And I get where they're coming from, where it's like, that's also an extreme example. If the Knicks lost in the first round this year, I think it would either be from massive injuries or like an extreme failure in process. So I get that in that example, right? But if they don't go as far to the finals or there are people who say it's championship or bust, and if it didn't matter, and if you don't do that, then it was the wrong decision. How would you respond to that?
That makes no sense. Like, do I get the idea that? Well, I mean, first of all, Tibbs didn't get to the championship, so if that's the standard, then he failed, right? Like we
Well,
can be
if we don't
honest
get
about
back
that.
to the ECF, if we lose in
No, but if we're saying no, if we're saying that this is championship or bust for Mike Brown, then it was championship or bust for Tom Thibodeau last year. It cannot be one or the other. This is the same fucking team. It's the same fucking team. Unless you think the difference between Cam Payne and Jordan fucking Clarkson is that significant, it's the same
well,
fucking team.
there's the East is more wide open this year. Would be the other.
But you don't win a championship because your conference is open. You're gonna play somebody elite in the finals. If you just got through your conference, because it's we saw this in the fucking 2000s. We saw this in the 2000s. You could, oh wow, you're the best team in these. Congratulations. Your reward is to go to the NBA Finals and get fucking trucked by the Lakers or the Spurs or whoever the fuck from the Western Conference. That was your reward.
All right,
That was your
finals or
reward.
bust. Finals or bust.
No, that is not, no, that's not it, right? The point is you have to be a championship contender. And they were not a championship contender last year. And they beat the Celtics, but they should have been a championship contender caliber team. They didn't profile like one. Why didn't they profile like one? You think it was the person, like, I'm not saying you, but I'm saying proverbially. There are many people who will just say that they did not have the actual personnel to do it. Okay. So their personnel wasn't good enough to win a championship. But you're trying to tell me that the Pacers had championship caliber personnel? Because that's what that series told me in the finals, right? That, hey, this team, they could win a championship. They had a chance. I mean, they were right there. You win a game 7 of the finals, you're right there. You're right there. You have every opportunity in the world to win a championship. There's no question that they're a championship caliber team. It is hard to have watched the Knicks in totality last year and come away with the conclusion that they played like a championship caliber team. They had results in the playoffs that could skew your decision making. And that's what stupid teams do, is they let results drive their thinking over process. That's what the fucking Hawks did when they made the Eastern Conference Finals, right? Oh, we're in the Eastern Conference Finals. That must mean everybody in this team is great and we're super young and all the young guys we drafted are going to be awesome. We don't have to do anything. Let's just run it back. And what happened? They've been in the fucking play-in since then. Like, you can't let results dictate your, like, trump over process, because if your results, you should look at, again, like the NFL this year. Commanders, fucking, they have a soft schedule last year. They win a wild card game, then they get the biggest cupcake in the second round against this depleted fucking Lions team whose entire defense is basically hurt. They've got me and you fucking playing linebacker. And yeah, they get to the NFC Championship game. What happened in the NFC Championship game? What the hell was the final score of that? 48-27 or something? Is that what it was? I don't remember what the hell it was. Yeah, it was a joke. And they showed, and that was level. But guess what? Their front office looked at that and they were like, oh, this is perfect. We have Jaden Daniels. He's great. We don't need to do anything. Let's just run it back. We'll trade for fucking fat ass Deebo Samuel and sign Wash Von Miller. And now we're a contender. Like, and now look at them. They're dog shit. They're terrible. They can't protect their quarterback. He got injured on Monday night. Hopefully he's fine. But that's what happens if you let results override process. Was your process was your process and was your talent level actually at that level? I think the next talent level is title caliber. It is contender caliber. You can win a championship with this level of talent. Is there stuff that they need? Yeah. There's stuff that any team needs. I watch OKC and I'm like, man, they could probably use the ball handlers. They could probably use some more shooting. They're absolutely a title contender because obviously they won a championship. We know that they're capable of doing it. Like I watch the Nuggets and I'm like, it'd be nice if this team didn't fucking fall into shit every time that they, every time Jokic sits, or if they could defend consistently, whatever. Like there are things that they lack. They're look at the Celtics. Even the Celtics that won the championship in 2024. You look at that team, be like, they still don't get to the rim. They don't have anybody that can consistently get to the rim, pressure the rim. They don't have it. That's a weakness of theirs. That's a weakness that the Knicks showed was real. Because if you get that variance to go against you, that shooting goes against you for enough time, it puts you in danger. But you don't have pivots because you don't have somebody that can consistently get to the rim. You don't have somebody who's a proficient mid-range scorer. So it puts you in danger. And so, like, you can look at all these teams that have won championships or are contenders or whatever, they all have flaws. So yeah, are the Knicks flawed? Were they flawed last year? Of course they were. That doesn't mean they didn't have the talent to be a contender. And every fucking argument that suggested so, basically just it's an insult to the players. It's an insult to your talent level. And I look at this team right now, and I don't know if Mike Brown is 100% going to get them there. I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is that the stuff that he's aiming for, the stuff that he's trying to do, improve their shot profile, get into your offense faster, be more aggressive about shooting threes, have a true green light to shoot threes, not just say it, but encourage your guys to do it, make it a point of emphasis. These are things. And by the way, do you know who the number one defensive rebounding team in the league is right now?
Defensive? Houston?
It is your New York Knickerbockers. The number one defensive rebound percentage team in the league this year. They also have a higher offensive rebound percentage.
Out for significant.
And they have a higher offensive rebound percentage right now than they did last year. Just putting this out there, I would like if they had a lower offensive rebound percentage because they would start making more shots. That would be cool. But like the point is, like you can strive for more and maintain some of your identity and maintain some of the strengths that you have established. And the Knicks needed to do that. I want to get to some of these numbers that I was able to pull up via the great NBA.com/stats. Hold on, let me pull up this tweet. I don't know. I just said a bunch of things. So while I pull this up, if you want to respond or expand, feel free.
No, I would agree with everything you said. I think we've seen some of the drawbacks of Mike Brown, right? But not here. But I think there's a few things that are clear. The guys are playing for him. It's not like the Tibbs firing made them stop. Brunson, as your top player, for everything you want to say about his shortcomings, has bought in, right? And it's paying off for him. His usage is up. You posted that. His usage is actually up. His points are up. His assists are down. And this is another thing I'll add, right? Who do you think averaged more assists in their career? Russell Westbrook or Steph Curry? I know you know the answer to this. It's Russ. Who do you think is the better passer or created a better environment for ball movement? Steph, right? Or Tony Parker.
Russ or
Steph.
Oh, yeah, Steph. Yes.
Same thing with Tony Parker, right? Tony Parker never really averaged more than 6 or 7 assists a game. But he was playing with him, and he didn't even have a three-point shot, but he was moving constantly. He was playing with him and it made him a much more dangerous player. And that's what's happening with Brunson. And the fact that he's bought in is a credit to Brunson, because a lot of stars would say, like, you're taking the ball in my hands, bro. I'm putting up 40 a game in the playoffs. And he hasn't done that, right? So it shows, he's obviously great. For other players, it might be a little more difficult. For Cat, it's been a little bit more up and down, dealing with injuries, trying to find his focus, but understand his role. So some of those things are going to be a little bit uneven, but I'll highlight that like you're actually getting more out of Brunson. You're getting more shots out of your best player while taxing him less. That is a fucking big deal,
Yeah. So the Knicks. Sorry. Let's do this. Let's get this going here. And voila. We are here. We have shared the page where we're looking at. Okay, so the Knicks so far this year, they're 6th in strength of schedule, 9th in simple rating system, 12th in offensive rating, while they are 22nd, I believe, in true shooting percentage as a team, 13th in defensive rating, 22nd in pace. That's up from 26th in pace. They are 6th in offensive rebound percentage and 1st in defensive rebound percentage. Those are from Basketball Reference. The number I wanted to get to here is these. These are Mikal Bridges. Sorry. Just highlight this real quick because I'm a loser. All right. This is Mikal Bridges stats from 2024 to this season. Usage went from 19.6 to 15.3, way down. Rebounds have gone up from 3.2 to 5.4. Assists have gone from 3.7 to 5.3. His touches have gone from 54.3 to 65.3. Time of possession up from 2.3 minutes per game to 3 minutes per game. OG Anunoby, his usage has been pretty flat, 19.7 to 19.5. The rebounds have gone from 4.8 to 5.7. Assists slightly up, 2.2 to 2.6. I would like for him to turn the ball over less. That would be nice. But his touches have gone from 44.9 to 53.9. His time possession is up from 1.5 minutes per game to 1.9 minutes per game. And then finally, Jalen Brunson this year, his usage has gone from 29.5% last year to 32.6% this year. You might be thinking, wow, how did this guy turn into an even bigger ball hog? And I wouldn't blame you unless you looked under the hood a little bit. His assists are also down, like you mentioned, 7.3 to 5.6. Oh my God. His shots, he's taking more shots and his assists have gone down. What an asshole. Look at his touches. He's taking more touches. 85.4 touches per game to 97.3. This guy just will not get off the ball. Just won't do it. Except his time possession is dropped from 8.5 to 7.7 minutes per game. His average dribbles per touch have gone from 6.04 dribbles per touch to 4.43. That's a massive drop. That's a massive, massive drop. That's nearly what, like a 33% drop on what he did last year. That's massive. And these to me all illustrate the primary point, which is the goal is not to reduce the importance of Jalen Brunson or, you know, demand that we run offense through Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby as some primary hub. No, it's to get them more involved. It's for them to be factors aside from standing in the corner and having designated plays, specific plays run for them, set plays run for them, right? To have them incorporated within the flow of the offense. And you're seeing that more. And that's why the Knicks passing is way up this year. They're averaging 315 passes per game. Last year, they were like 282 or something like that. These are significant differences, and it might seem stupid. It might seem not that big of a deal, right? Well, does it really matter that much if Brunson's dribbling the ball 1.5 times less this year? I promise you it matters a ton. I promise you it matters a ton. It is a huge difference in the NBA. Mike Brown talks about it. And honestly, I think that if you ask Mike Brown, he would want Brunson to dribble even less than he is right now. I think that his ideal version of what this offense looks for or what it looks like at the end of it all when he thinks everybody's on the same page and everybody's indoctrinated into his mad methods. I think it would be less than that. I think there's still a work in progress. I don't think this is the final form. I don't think what we're seeing is the end product. I think there's a lot more to come. I think they're going to end up doing a lot more with Cat. I think you're seeing them do more with Cat as these games go on, and I think you're going to see Cat get more comfortable and his efficiency go up. They're going to start shooting better at the rim than they have been. I mean, they've been terrible at the rim this year. This is, again, we talked about it before, but this is basically the same roster as last year. There's no reason that their shooting at the rim should be significantly further down. I think that 100% will go up as the year goes on. But like these are the necessary changes. If I trade 5 first-round picks for fucking Mikal Bridges, guess what, man? I need him to be a factor. I don't, and I'm not talking about, well, when Brunson runs out, we run set plays for you. No, it can't just be like that. It has to be together. It has to be layered. It has to build on each other. Let the beat build, bitch. But like these are it's real though. Like again, I go back to like the orchestra or symphony kind of like analogy, but like that's what it is, right? Like you don't want your trumpets to be great and your saxophones to be great and your violin and your fucking flutes to be great separately. You want that all to combine to create one great sound, not 3 good but separate sounds. And that's what the Knicks offense was far too much last year. It was far too much. Oh, Cat, it's your time to go. Brunson, your time to go. Mikal Bridges, right now we need you to step because Brunson's out or because Brunson's sitting this quarter or whatever. It needs to be together. It has to be together. And if it's not those things, you're not going to get to where you want. And I think that is really that. I hate to say it, but it's like that's that special thing that made Indiana so fucking annoying to play against, and it's what made them greater than the sum of their parts, is it built on each other. Like we talked earlier in this podcast about, oh, you try stuff to see if it works. I don't think that that Tyrese Halliburton playing next to TJ McConnell is a functional, like, major lineup. But you know what? That lineup for like 2 or 3 minutes here, 3 or 4 minutes there, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And those little things, right? How do we get, oh, this thing actually works in short spurts. How does that help us get through a 48-minute game? What does that open up? What players does it, how does all of this stuff piece together so that over the course of 48 minutes, we are absolutely, not only are we the best that we can be, but when shit hits the fan and we need to change up our in-game strategy, we know how to do that, right? Like NFL teams know what their best blitz packages are, what's their best, zone defense coverages. They know all of that stuff, or they're supposed to. The best teams do anyway. Um, that's what the Knicks need to do. They need to know that stuff, and then they also need to get more out of all the pieces they have. So when I see stuff like this, when I see those touches, and I think the Brunson numbers in a lot of ways and the Bridges numbers are, I think those are the most encouraging to me because you want the ball popping around more and you still want Brunson to get a lot of shots. He's your best offensive player, he's your best scorer, he's one of the best scorers in the league. But if he's getting his usage in ways like this, where he's not really dominating the ball and he's a threat off the ball in ways that compromise and put pressure on defenses that you didn't do at all last year, yeah, I think that is what they're striving for, and it's what's necessary to get this team over the top.
Yeah, and it makes you less predictable, right? Like, why do teams play different zone coverages? Why do they mix it up? Why do they drop? This is always something you hear, right? Why am I dropping Micah Parsons in the pass coverage, right? Or
Yeah, yeah.
because if you're ready to block Micah Parsons, and suddenly he's in coverage, and the quarterback doesn't know that he might throw a pick. That tackle is also blocking no one, right? So if someone's expecting Brunson to get the ball and heating up and overplaying that, and then suddenly you got Bridges up there, right? And Brunson can move all over the court, right? Um, I mean, I love Brunson. If Steph played for Tom Thibodeau, you don't think Steph would have been able to be a pick and roll demon, just or isolation demon for 40 minutes a game and put up insane stats? Of course he would have. What's really made them special is that he can. Now, I'm not saying Brunson is Steph, but he's a very good off-ball shooter. He can finish off cuts. Um, he's getting better now at making decisions in traffic. And the last thing I'll say on this too is, like, this is something I talked about with Dallas and Prez, right? And Prez has generally been, and both of them have been generally down, or last year were down on Bridges' passing. And so when we'd say, can we actually have a secondary playmaker? And they're like, I don't know who it is though. Um, this is why we've often talked about getting a guy like Colin Sexton, which I still don't think would necessarily be a bad idea. But that was kind of the book on Bridges. Not a very good passer, um, you know, because he can drive and he can make things happen. His assists will come up, but he doesn't make very advanced reads. And you've seen a different Bridges to the point where Dallas actually messaged me. He was like, we were talking about, is it just that Tibbs sucks or that we don't have passers? Bridges is proving that wrong, right? And I do think to take things with a grain of salt, focusing on Bridges specifically, this is his second year. So he's also developing some organic comfort with the rest of the team that maybe he didn't have last year. But you see is also just much more confident. He got paid too. There's other things, right? So it's maybe not all on Tibbs. But you see him yelling at OG Anunoby, hey, get back in transition. Now that he's not asked to fight through 5,000 screens a game because Deuce is playing more, you're seeing him more engaged even at the point of attack. He had a
But
bad game?
they're also switching more too. So that's
Yeah,
another thing.
right. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Celtics series was one of his better defensive performances because they were switching more. So he's more engaged. And part of that, to your point, right? When guys are more engaged on offense, is that right? I don't want to get into all that. I think there's an argument that, yeah, you should bring it on defense every play, whether you get the ball or not. We live in the real world, right? Guys want their touches. Guys want to feel like they're in a rhythm, right? So they're not cold getting back on defense. So it does seem to be energizing. Have those results shown up? No, they've had some awful defensive performances. That's still an area to work on. Um, but but I think you're seeing that there's just more upside with this, and you need to bet on upside at this point because this is why we love Tibbs because you get the 4 seed. Everyone's like almighty. I don't want to go after anyone. I'm not saying that. The point is that people are like Knicks fans won got the 4th seed and they acting like they won the championship, or whatever, right? And it's like, well, we're in the desert for 20 years, right? That's going to be the reaction.
And also, that team wasn't supposed to do fucking shit. That team was not supposed to be in the playoffs.
Yeah. And Tibbs deserves all the credit. I think you said he would be a good coach for Portland to replace, presumably Chauncey Billups is going to be back.
Yeah.
That
especially
he's
after that
great in
fucking
those
game I
situations.
watched them play last night. I'll tell you that.
I actually think, weirdly enough, he's the best coach. He's one of the better coaches for young players, especially if he's forced to play them, because it is about showing up every time on defense, and those guys are hungry and trying to prove themselves, and they'll buy in. You do need to make it with vets. You have to make it a little bit easier, and to win at that highest level, you need to win on the margins. You need more than you need more than just a very clear identity. So I think we talked about this, but and the last thing I'll say is, like, Tibbs will reduce your variance, right? Tibbs will say, we're not going to turn the ball over. We're not going to beat ourselves, right? We're going to clean up the glass. You're not going to get easy buckets at the rim. You are going to have to hit tough shots to beat us. And that means you have a pretty high floor, right? They never won. They won 37 games one year. Every other year, they're over 40 games, even in the COVID shortened season. So it gave them a very high floor. That has a lot of advantages. Right now, where they're at, though, when they're at close to the top, and at that point, you need some upside. You need an edge. And that's where I think at that level, it can't just be we're showing up every possession. It has to be more than that. And it could be that Brown's way or this way is not going to give you that upside either, or they're not going to be able to make good on it. But you're increasing that variance. You're giving yourself more of a chance that if everything completely clicks, we're looking at we can't even predict, right? Even we could have predicted a best case scenario with Tibbs, right? Last year we could have said, given his tendencies, me and you probably both said before the season, Eastern Conference Finals or second round, whatever. If you lose to the Celtics, fine. And then once the Cavs are really good, we said that's also acceptable. But that was baked in because we knew, like, there's kind of a limit on how high this team can go the way they play. Now I don't know what it is, right? If it really clicks, because you're seeing guys excel at things that they hadn't before and amplifying each other, to your point, right? And another example I'll show, right? One of the most talented teams since in the last 10, 15 years, Oklahoma City had 3 future MVPs. One guy who already won it there. Westbrook was already an established, at that time, top 10 player. Harden didn't fully blow up, but the talent was very clear. Then you have Ibaka. They didn't get Adams until after that trade, but the point is Durant and Westbrook never amplified each other because it was take turns. To your point, right? It's not just you take over when the guy's on the bench or when he's not on the ball and he's watching.
And to be fair, that can work. Like, it can work, but you need to have a certain caliber of player. Like, it worked when Cleveland won the championship.
Worked to win a championship was LeBron and Wade. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like LeBron and Wade, I think LeBron and Kyrie, it worked. I mean, how much you want to credit that particular thing that they took turns for the reason they won the championship in Cleveland is up to you. But it did work. They did win a championship. Whatever. You can go through history and find the examples of teams that weren't exactly like beautifully meshing and building on each other's strengths. But I think it's worth noting, even in if you want to bring up Steph and KD, right? The first year that KD was there, that was the best they played. And it was because KD was like fully immersed in the Golden State way of playing, and he was happy to like do all the kumbaya bullshit that they do, and pass and cut and screen and all this shit. But then, like, as time went on and he became more and more like himself, which is an annoying fucking asshole. Um, and he wanted more of his ISO touches and post touches and mid post touches that like they were not quite as good. They did not hit the same heights. And it's worth noting that like Steve Kerr and guys on that team have talked about that by the end. It was just like it was like not a fun experience. It was like not a fun experience for them. So sorry to interrupt, but I did
But
want to
winning
bring
is
that up.
more fun than fun is fun.
It's the thing is you can have both, right? It's and obviously like we know this because this is how it always works. You're going to get the points in the postseason and in crunch time and whatever. When yeah, it does become about all right. Let's get the ball to Brunson. Let's get the ball to your best guy, and let's let him go to work. And of course, like that's always going to be part of basketball because that's always going to like that's just inherent to the sport. But you don't like the idea is also like, can we reduce the amount of times we ask that of that player? Can we reduce the amount of times we go to Jalen Brunson and are like, we need you to go win us this basketball game. I mean, yesterday is a great example. He didn't play well. He was what 6 of 17. Not I wouldn't say he didn't play well. He didn't shoot well. He was 6 17, whatever it was. It was not a great shooting performance, not a great scoring performance from him. But they put up 119. The game was basically over midway through the fourth, probably earlier than that, in all honesty. And like other guys pick up your slack because you're producing better shots and you're giving guys other opportunities to shine. And like last year, I remember that game. We had a game against Washington that went to overtime. I don't know if you remember this. This is like we beat the Pelicans in a game that we had to come back in. Then we go to overtime against Washington, and Brunson ends up dropping whatever it was, like 50 something. And he's got a bunch of highlights on Bilal Koulibaly and whoever else. But it's like you're playing the Wizards, man. Like you shouldn't need Brunson to go nuclear to win games like that. Like that should be a game where you let your offense cook and other guys can shine and they get theirs. But yeah, when you're going to play Oklahoma City and you're playing, Cleveland and you're playing whoever, like, yeah, he's going to need to step it up and you're going to put more of an onus on getting him the ball and prioritizing him. But it can't be as often as it was last year. And if it was, like, we have 2 years of evidence of this, that if you're asking this of him throughout the course of the season and into the playoffs, into the first round, into the second round, he's going to have like he's going to suffer at the end of it. He's not going to be able to get you. He's not going to have the tank to get you over the top. And like that's just the reality. That's the reality. If you swap Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson last year, right? Forget what Indiana does. I don't want to take away from what Halliburton does for them because I think what he does for them is I've unfortunately come to accept that he is quite valuable. Um, But like if you put Halliburton in Tibbs's offense, he'd still be really good, but he would be not nearly as good at that. And the team would not be as good as they were with Brunson last year, which is like different than saying, whatever. But like it's about one playing your best players, right? Not just Brunson, but Cat and McAllen, whoever. But like playing to your best players' strengths overall. Not just what do they do best, but okay, I know what they do best, but is he good at this? Is he good at that? Can he do this? Can he do this? Can he do that? Like it's playing to all of it, playing to the collective set of skills. And you know, we talked about it a lot where it's like Brunson's a fucking awesome off-ball player because he's an absolute sniper. Like he's a sniper on catch and shoot threes. So, it's important to get more of those. And there are ways to do it and we just lost that. We didn't have it once Randall left and that's, if you want to say that look, if maybe if the Knicks were like this is an interesting discussion. So I'll just throw this to you. I think we could probably wrap with this in the next 10, 15 minutes here. If you were the Knicks back in whatever summer of 2024, presumably at this time you've extended Tom Thibodeau, right? He is your coach. Do you think that you should have the foresight to maybe be like, we know why we want Cat, but is our ceiling materially different with if we do this trade? under Tom Thibodeau, or are we better off keeping Randall? Because I think there is an argument to be made, I think, that because of how Tom Thibodeau wants to play, how he runs his offense, right? That Randall is a better fit, and that the ceiling you're not getting a much different ceiling by adding Cat. And I guess the argument is like, well, if you committed to Tom Thibodeau as a coach, should that be a factor in your decision?
I hear what you're saying stylistically. I think it's worth noting Cat had a career season last year.
Yeah, he was awesome. He's awesome.
To your point, I think if Hartenstein doesn't leave, I think you're probably more informed on exactly how much that an impact. But if they were looking at Mitchell Robinson, who knows when he's coming back, Hartenstein isn't going to leave, then part of it is the fit of, okay, it's this. If you have Tibbs as a coach and he's adamant that he will not play Julius Randle at the 5, but he will play Cat at the 5, then that's also part of it, right? So I think it's tough to say that in a vacuum. And they probably felt like, well, okay, so 1, we need a center. 2, Cat is better than Randall overall. He's played for Tibbs, right? So there's some comfort there. And we have to pay Randall. I think that was the biggest thing, right? They did not want to pay Julius Randall, no matter what the fit with the coach was. So I think I think this is a lot of the moves they make. Let's acquire talent, and that gives us some flexibility without compromising us, and let's see how it goes, right? So I think that, for a few reasons. One, the center issue was, I think, a precipitating factor, as was Randall's contract, and part of that is the way Tibbs wants to play. He would not want to play Randall at the 5, so you're giving him an out there. 2, you're just adding more value, and 3, I think ultimately, if you have concerns about whether a team led by Brunson and Cat can win the championship, I think those concerns are significantly amplified with Randall and Brunson, right? Especially in the playoffs, right? And let's not forget, in the playoffs, Randall plays the way Tibbs want, and it had been horrible. Randall has finally had playoff success, not playing exactly that way. Well, I mean, he still plays very much the same way. I think he's just improved as a playoff player. But I think we've talked about, right? It's like, if you think this roster is not good enough to win what we have right now, Cat and Brunson, then you say, all right, it might not be, but we don't know for sure. Let's change something, right? And they change the coach, and they say, if we try other stuff with these guys, then we should get better results. If you did not believe, right, that Randall, if you're wondering, well, is Tibbs the right answer? Well, maybe it's because Randall just isn't that guy in the playoffs. Okay, let's change that. And then let's see if Tibbs works better with a different kind of big. Because that was a lot of the issue, right? Like, Randall takes up he likes to post up, that clogs driving lanes for other guys. They tried something different. So do I think it's a lack of foresight? No. I think every year there was something, right? I think one of the common refrains was last year was like, well, if like even when before the season started, well, look at how much depth the Knicks added. If Tibbs had this kind of depth, he'd have been a lot better. Last year, like he didn't have much depth at all. But a few years ago, it was, well, the Knicks need to consolidate, right? Tibbs isn't going to play 9 or 10 guys so many minutes. So which is it? Right? So it almost seems to this point, it's like he wants to play a certain way, and everything needs to be perfect. You can't manage to that necessarily. But I think more than that, right? I think the outweighing factors was he was not going to play Randall at the 5. And once Hartenstein and Mitch were not going to be playing the next season, in a year where they had contender aspirations, or at least wanted to get better, that probably was like, in addition to, and then you're saying that, well, we also have to extend Randall, and if we're going to have this issue where Hartenstein's gone, Mitch, who we're for the foreseeable future kind of in bed with, we're paying a guy who can only play the 4 we're going to play him, who is inconsistent in the playoffs or inconsistent 3-point shooter. We could just pay Cat more and solve a few of our problems. And I think so. I think that's how I think about it. I think that they probably weighed all that. And Randall fits some of the things that Tibbs wants to do. He's also not the best fit for some of the other things. And ultimately, it didn't work out to the ceiling that you maybe would have wanted.
Yeah. I think that's probably correct. I don't know. I do find it interesting to think about, like, if you commit to a coach, then how far does that commitment stretch? Because talent is always kind of like the thing that ultimately trumps everything. Um, and yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's not. I think Cat had a great year last year, and he was a huge reason that the Knicks were able to get as far as they did in the postseason. I think he's gotten too much shit for a variety of reasons. Um,
You don't think he's a coach killer?
no, I don't think he's a coach killer. I think that's nonsense. He's a player who has switched positions late in his career to accommodate others. He's passed the torch on to Anthony Edwards happily. When he was still in Minnesota, he's come to New York and been very happy to run around and call Brunson Cap. No, I don't think he has. I don't think he's a coach killer. I don't think he has. I mean, he has an ego because all these guys have an ego, but I don't think his ego. He puts his ego ahead of the team consistently or anything like that. Anyways, but yeah, I think it's just an interesting thought I had, because yeah, I do wonder. Look, the Knicks do play the Minnesota Timberwolves tomorrow. Anthony Edwards is now being listed as questionable. He had a hamstring injury, so we'll see if he suits up. He probably will because they're playing at Madison Square Garden, and I'm sure he wants to play at Madison Square Garden.
I mean, I
Julius
guess
Randle's
let me ask you this, right?
Hey,
I think if you were to ask me, for example, if you have Mike D'Antoni as coach, you probably shouldn't go get Carmelo Anthony. I think that would be a better example, I think, of what you're saying. You know what I mean? Although he made it work with Harden, Harden was a way better passer, and he had changed his offense. But like that's where I think it's a more egregious thing, in terms of not playing to your coach. But like, you also have to ask if it's a very limited style of play. That is a little bit of a reflection on the coach because rosters are going to overturn a lot. If you remember, right, when we were in college, when I started at college, Michigan hired 2 coaches from West Virginia in football and basketball. One said, "I cannot win without a mobile quarterback." He also didn't know how to coach defense, but that should have been a bit of a red flag because there have been other. Urban Meyer has won with guys who run a 4.9. He likes to run spread with running QBs. Good coaches figure it out, right? You shouldn't have that. So there's a degrees, right? Some constraints might be a little bit more understandable. Andy Reid's like, I want a prototype left tackle. Fine, that's a little bit understandable. But on the other side, on basketball, you hire Beeline, and he had played this 5-out 2-guard offense, and he figures out how to morph into pick and roll. He figures out how to play with a point forward because that's what he had. And it wasn't the best version, but they made the tournament the second year, right? He was able to play Zach Novak against Blake Griffin at the 4 and give a competitive game, right? So I do think, like, yeah, you tailor to your coach's preferences, but if those become very restrictive, then you have to ask, are you really that great a coach?
yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's really what constrains Tibbs from making that final step. Is I just don't think he is willing to adapt enough, and I don't think he is flexible enough in game strategy wise, personnel wise, whatever. Um, and that is certainly a holdback. Like I said, the Knicks are playing the Timberwolves tomorrow. I would say that this is their. I think this is their potentially their stiffest test of the season. I know that Minnesota's gotten off to a up and down start as well, and their defense is not where they would like it to be, and they have their own issues that they're dealing with. But coming into the season, I thought pretty highly of the Timberwolves. I think me and you both thought pretty highly of the Timberwolves. Randall's gotten off to a super hot start. You think he's scoring like he's leading the league right now in isolation points per possession. It's at something like 1.65 points per possession out of ISO. Um, Brunson, I believe, is third, 1.39. Just saying. I guess just to wrap up with this, the Knicks have had some defensive issues over the last, I would say, really the last four games or so. Do you have anything in particular that you're looking forward here, in terms of how they adapt to this challenge, or do you think that there's still more in the space of like we're still getting comfortable with our base defense and we're gonna just live with that for now, and we're not gonna throw any specific kind of wrinkles at somebody um, in the situation? Because I think this is a game where maybe if you were if you're a creative defensive mind, I think you might want to get creative in a matchup like this. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. Like, so I guess like the idea is like, do you kind of just run your base defense, or do you think that they should be throwing in some mixed packages and stuff?
I think no matter the opponent, you're throwing in some mixed packages right now, right? This is a team you would arguably, I would say, need to experiment even more on defense than offense. Because we know that on offense, you have the floor of any possession is a Jalen Brunson ISO, which is a pretty good floor. On defense is where you need to plug gaps, right? You have two poor defenders that are playing a ton of minutes. So the things I would be looking for is Randall's on a tear. OG should be physically capable. If you're going to switch a lot, though, I don't think Bridges can switch onto Randall. And then he can beat Cat with speed. I'm curious how they deal with Julius Randle's three-point shooting. We know he can get hot. We know he can also go cold. For example, with Jalen Smith, it seemed like they were making a conscious decision to leave him open. Do you do that with Randall, right? How do they handle that? Randall struggles to deal with double teams. Even against a guy like OG, because he's so strong, you're going to have to deal with. That's not a matchup you want him to be able to just kind of attack. So when and how do you send doubles? Do you experiment with that? And I'm also curious how they guard the point of attack, right? Because Anthony Edwards is, obviously you and I think very highly of Deuce, but Anthony Edwards is bigger than him, stronger than him, and very fast. So do you put Bridges on him to start? Do you switch on that? How does Finch attack that? Does he run Randall and Ant and pick and roll and make you switch and get mismatches for Randall? And then the last thing I'll say is Rudy Gobert is a great offensive rebounder. I wonder if at some point you put a wing on him, right? Do you put Bridges on Rudy so that it makes less sense if Mitch plays, right? I think for some lineups, right, can you have, instead of Mitch having to be on Gobert, can you put him on someone else? Can you put a wing on Gobert, right? I think there's definitely a lot of interesting things, but I think the two things I'm most interested in are can you speed up Randall and do the things that other teams we've seen cause him to struggle have done, and two, how do you guard Ant at the point of attack?
Yeah, I don't know.
But to answer your original question, I'd also say it should be both. I'd like them to experiment and be tactical. I also think they should be experimenting more just to see what guys are comfortable with, and against a playoff caliber opponent, what kinds of things you can and can't do, even if that costs your game at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious because Randall's been on the tear. He's been awesome. There's no question about it. But like, I've just seen a lot of like revisionist stuff after Cat has gotten off to a poor start. Randall's got off to a hot start. The Knicks lost 3 games in a row, and it's like, oh my god, are they terrible? This is the worst thing in the world. I just think that like you shouldn't overreact to this early game samples. And like, if I'm the Knicks, yeah, is there a chance Randall just continues this tear he's on? And yeah, like if that's the case, then so be it. He's not a 1.65 point per possession as isolation scorer because nobody is. Literally nobody is that good at isolation over the course of 82 games. I would
He's also shooting
continue.
43% from three, which I would imagine will come down. So
Yeah, which is not going to be the case. And so, like, I think if you're the Knicks, you should probably just defend to the historic, like, what is historic standards and not overreact. Now, if he's going off or whatever, then maybe you can adjust. But I think assuming if Edwards plays, to me, he is the priority of who you have to handle, and everything else is secondary on that team. So I think if you are able to cut off Anthony Edwards, not only will he potentially have he has not just he has the potential to kind of hijack the offense and try to get himself going. Um, but I just don't trust their other initiation at all. Randall is obviously a really good player, but like I don't he's not this good. Like, he's not what he is playing at right now. That's not his average performance. That's not his true level. Um, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Mike Brown matches up because I think Minnesota's front court has given us trouble at times. We destroyed them in Minnesota last year. They handled us in New York. Cat missed the second game, the one in New York. So it'll be interesting to see how the Knicks go about this matchup. They pose interesting questions because they have size on the perimeter, and then they have lineups with size on the perimeter. They have obviously the ability to play big in the front court. Randall's one of the most bruising front court players, scorers specifically in the league. So, and it's worth mentioning the Knicks struggled with Giannis, which okay, everybody struggles with Giannis, but I do think it'll be interesting to see how maybe they try and defend the Timberwolves here because they've been a pretty good 3-point shooting team going back to last season, but they also obviously have dynamic athletes and interior scorers like Randall and Edwards. So kind of wondering which way the Knicks teeter in terms of their overall strategy. So far, I think they've given up the fourth highest fourth highest 3-point attempt rate for opponents in the league, um, which you prefer that to be lower, but sometimes there's trade-offs to that. If you're able to take stuff away from the rim, they've not been fantastic at taking away stuff from the rim. So improvement on either of those things would be good, especially in a game like tomorrow. But um, you know, whether they win or lose, I think there's a lot of stuff to be encouraged by, especially on the offensive end of the floor. And I'm not expecting this team to really kind of find its true groove until about the maybe 20 game mark. I think there's a lot for them to improve on both ends of the floor, individually and collectively. Okay. I think that's a good place. And Stacy, let the people know where they can find you and plug anything that you'd like to plug.
You can find me at StacyPadden89 on Twitter. I'll just plug all the great work at the Strickland.
Awesome. I will also echo your sentiments. Check out all the work at the Strickland. I have nothing to plug personally, but that is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great evening. Thank you to our sponsor, FanDuel, and I'll see you all on Friday. Peace.